even though we started the whole thing over here, like we played here before the Sex Pistols were even sort of, thought of.
Yeah.
And now we've always been there, and people are beginning to realise that now they want more than...
The official account of Bon Scott's death was straightforward. He drank too much, passed out in a car, and never woke up. For decades, that's what the world believed about AC/DC's wild frontman. But the true events of that cold February night in 1980 raised many questions. A friend disappeared years later, the investigation was unusually fast, and several hours remain unaccounted for. Some evidence even hints that Bon may not have been alone when he died. Now, after 45 years of speculation, disturbing details about what really happened in that small Renault car are finally emerging. Ronald Belford Scott was born on July 9, 1946, in Forfar, a small town in Scotland. His parents, Chick and Isa, had already lost their first child, so Bon's arrival brought great relief and happiness. They lived above a bakery in Kirriemuir, a peaceful town surrounded by hills. With its stone buildings and old-world charm, it was where Bon spent his early childhood alongside his younger brother Derek, who was born in 1949. Life in Scotland during those years was calm and rooted in tradition, very different from the wild path Bon would later take. But in 1952, everything changed. Post-war Britain was struggling, jobs were limited, food was still rationed, and families like the Scots felt stuck. That year, they made a bold move, immigrating to Australia through a government scheme that provided cheap travel for British families. For only £10 each, they boarded a ship bound for a fresh start. Thousands of British families made the same journey, hoping for better lives under the Australian sun. At just 6 years old, Bon arrived in a Melbourne suburb called Sunshine. Despite the name, it wasn't a warm welcome. His thick Scottish accent made him an easy target at school. Classmates teased him, mocked the way he spoke, and told him to talk like an Aussie, or get beaten up. But Bon stood his ground. He refused to change how he spoke and turned his defiance into pride. That's when he started calling himself Bon, short for Bonnie Scott, sending a clear message that he wouldn't change for anyone. Bon's family continued to grow. In 1953, his younger brother Graham was born. The Scotts were beginning to settle into Australian life. Then, in 1956, they moved again, this time to Fremantle, a gritty, working-class port city in Western Australia. It was a tougher environment, but it felt more genuine. Bon attended school, joined the local Scots pipe band, and learned to play the drums. He even picked up the fife and recorder. Music became something steady in his life, though Fremantle also toughened him. By the early 1960s, Bon wasn't just playing music, he was running with gangs. Despite being small, he earned a reputation as a fighter. People knew not to mess with him. He quickly lost interest in school and dropped out at 15. Instead of studying, he listened to Chuck Berry records and avoided authority. But Bon wasn't lazy. He took on physically demanding jobs, working as a farmhand, a crayfisherman, and an apprentice mechanic. One company even named him their best first-year apprentice, surprising many. Bon also worked as a postman, bartender, and storeman. Still, none of it truly mattered to him. These jobs were only a way to make money while he pursued his real dream, becoming the lead singer of a rock band. Meanwhile, his street life was spiraling out of control. From 1957 to 1963, Bon led one of the roughest teen gangs in Fremantle. He smoked, drank, fought regularly, and started experimenting with drugs. When police assaulted one of his friends, Bon lashed out and badly beat one of the officers. He even got a tattoo reading "Death Before Dishonor" inked across his lower stomach, just above the belt. That kind of act was both bold and dangerous for a teenager in 1960s Australia. Bon's rebellious behavior and his body were becoming statements of defiance. By 1963, his actions caught up to him. At just 16, Bon was arrested for stealing petrol and fleeing from the police. He gave them a fake name and faced more charges, including one for having sex with an underage girl. As punishment, he was sent to Riverbank Juvenile Institution, a high-security reform school for troubled youth. Life there was harsh. The guards woke boys at 6 a.m., forced them into cold showers, and rationed poor-quality cigarettes weekly. Fights were common. Solitary confinement was routine. And even worse, many inmates later revealed that abuse and fear were widespread inside. But Bond didn't let the system break him. He kept a low profile, stayed out of trouble, and focused on getting released. Music remained his anchor. He joined a band formed by other inmates and played drums at a performance attended by his parents. Smiling at his mother, Bond said, "I'm going to be famous." She thought maybe the experience had changed him for the better. Bond was released just before. At Christmas, the court decided to drop the most serious charge against Bond, concluding that he'd learned his lesson. After being released, he attempted to enlist in the citizen military forces, possibly in an effort to turn his life around, but they turned him down, labeling him as socially maladjusted. That label didn't seem to faze him. In 1964, Bon Scott was just a young kid in Perth with big dreams and a drum kit. He co-founded a band called The Spectators, performing alongside John Collins. The band had a unique setup. Both Bon and Collins were drummers and singers, and they would switch roles halfway through their sets. Their sound blended beat pop with rock and roll, though their true love was for gritty blues. While The Spectators often covered well-known acts like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, their real passion shone through in their renditions of songs by the Kinks, Them, and the Pretty Things. Their raw, energetic performances started gaining attention. By October 1965, they had the opportunity to record 4 songs, Gloria, On My Mind, Yesterday, and It Ain't Necessarily So, for a local TV program called Club 17. These early recordings captured a young Bon beginning to develop his vocal identity. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, his personal life was growing just as intense. Bon fell deeply for a girl named Maria Van Vlimmen, a 17-year-old Catholic girl, blonde, from a wealthy background, and everything Bon wasn't. They met at the Medina Youth Club, where The Spectators first played live. Maria quickly became more than just a girlfriend. She was integrated into the band's circle, even managing their fan club. But their relationship wasn't simple. Bon claimed he wanted to marry a virgin, and he saw Maria as that person. At the same time, Maria was also seeing Brian Gainan, the band's 15-year-old bass player. She later admitted to holding hands with both boys during performances under a rug, but insisted she hadn't slept with either. The entire situation was awkward, and both their families disapproved. Maria's parents saw Bon as beneath her. Bon's parents thought Maria was arrogant. Still, they made it work, for a time. Bon's life was already full of contradictions, and that theme followed him everywhere. On stage, he was outrageous, wild, crude, and spontaneous. But off stage, he often came across as gentle, kind, and introspective. Angus Young once described him as the filthiest person he knew, and that may have been true. Yet with Maria, Bon was different. He didn't drink or curse. The two went to church together. Bon would even dress up just to meet her for lunch during his work breaks. On weekends, they'd enjoy live music or eat fish and chips by the water. Things changed again in late 1966 when The Spectators merged with another local group, the Winstons, to form the Valentines. This move proved successful. With Bon and Vince Lovegrove as dual frontmen, the Valentines quickly became one of Perth's most popular bands. They were youthful, attractive, and self-assured. They even set some strict guidelines, one being no girlfriends allowed at gigs. Maria hated that rule. Bon tried to respect it, but Maria kept showing up, frustrated with both him and Lovegrove. Despite the tension, the band's momentum continued. The Valentines broke into the Perth music charts with their version of Every Day I Have to Cry, and soon they relocated to Melbourne in pursuit of larger opportunities. The relocation brought significant change. The band began collaborating with Harry Vanda and George Young from the Easy Beats, who provided them with catchy, tailored songs for their two-singer format. By 1969, they'd scored national hits with Juliet and My Old Man's a Groovy Old Man. Their bubblegum pop style proved especially popular with teenage girls, who loved their energy and charisma. the band toured with major Australian acts like Russell Morris and Johnny Farnham and participated in a major event called Operation Starlift. Just as success peaked, trouble surfaced. In September 1969, police raided the band's rehearsal space at a surf club in John Juke, Victoria. Authorities had been monitoring them for weeks after a jealous rival tipped them off. During the raid, police found a pipe and some Moroccan marijuana powder. It became Australia's first high-profile drug bust involving a rock band, attracting widespread media coverage. The pop magazine Go Set even reported that the music world had been shaken by the revelation. Each band member was fined $150 and placed on a good behavior bond. But the reality went deeper. According to their roadie, the band was already dabbling in stronger drugs. Despite promising to stop using marijuana, Bon, drummer Paddy Beach, and the roadie continued using it as if nothing had happened. Bon didn't try to hide from the fallout. In fact, he leaned into the controversy. Rather than stay silent, he began openly advocating for marijuana legalization. That stance was bold, especially in 1969 Australia, where the country was politically on edge due to the Vietnam War, and conservative leaders were cracking down on youth rebellion. But Bon didn't care. He told reporters that Bon's personal life began to shift dramatically during this time. At a fraternity gig in 1971, he met Irene Thornton. Their connection was instant, and by January 1972, they were married. Irene worked as a secretary, steady and grounded, the exact opposite of Bon's unpredictable and wild lifestyle. Their relationship was intense, both passionate and turbulent. Friends recalled how fiercely they fought and how just as fiercely they reconciled. But by the end of 1973, cracks had begun to show. Fraternity's UK tour had been a disaster. Finances were tight, Bon was drinking heavily, and he was unfaithful often. Their modest apartment in Adelaide became a battleground. After one particularly vicious argument, Bon jumped on his motorbike and took off while drunk. That reckless act hinted at the chaos looming ahead. By mid-1974, fraternity had disbanded, and Bon's marriage had collapsed. He was broke, lost, and spiraling downward. The UK tour had been intended as fraternity's big break. In an attempt to appeal to European audiences, they even rebranded themselves as Fong. But when they landed in the UK in 1973, reality hit hard. No one knew who they were. At a gig in Bournemouth where they opened for Status Quo, Bon and the band mocked the headliners for looking like fashion models. But when Status Quo hit the stage, dressed in denim and armed with a killer sound system, they blew fraternity off the stage. It wasn't just a one-off disappointment, this pattern repeated itself throughout the tour. On May 3, 1974, everything nearly ended. That evening, Bon turned up drunk to a rehearsal with the Mount Lofty Rangers, a loose, collaborative group of musicians, not a formal band like fraternity. He was already agitated from an earlier argument with Irene and ended up clashing with Bruce Howe again. They'd fought before, but no one could say what triggered Bon this time. He stormed out, slamming the door multiple times before leaving. Peter Head, the band's keyboardist, tried to stop him. "You're too drunk to drive," he warned. But Bon ignored him. He downed some Jack Daniels, jumped on his Suzuki GT 550, and rode off into the night. Just minutes later, tragedy struck. At an intersection in West Cuddon, Adelaide, Bon crashed head-on into a 1950s FC Holden. The driver, 17-year-old Lee Morgan, was out with 3 friends. It was raining, visibility was poor, and Bon's bike headlights were barely visible. The collision was devastating. Bon was thrown through the car's windshield. Both the car and the motorcycle were destroyed. Lee Morgan, who would later become a respected community figure, never forgot the crash. It changed his life. The following morning, the Sunday Mail identified the injured biker as Bon Scott from fraternity. Bon slipped into a coma for 3 days, and no one was sure he'd survive. When his friends were finally allowed to see him, they were shocked by his appearance. His face was battered beyond recognition, he'd lost all his teeth, and his body was covered in bruises and cuts. Peter Head described his condition as terrible. Bon remained hospitalized for 3 weeks. The accident had been so severe that when George Young later heard Bon's name suggested for ACDC, he dismissed the idea, convinced no one that badly injured could perform. Bon's time with the Mount Lofty Rangers was effectively over. He had played only 12 shows and recorded 2 songs with them, tracks that wouldn't be released until many years later. That crash didn't just injure him physically, it tore his life apart. Everything familiar, his band, his marriage, his routine, was gone. During his recovery, he took whatever work he could find just to survive. He mowed lawns, painted houses, and scraped by. At 27, he felt old and feared his music career was finished. He needed a new beginning. In October 1974, Bon left Adelaide behind for good. He moved to Sydney, determined to start over, even though he had no clear path ahead. His second chance came from an old friend, Vince Lovegrove, his former bandmate from the Valentines. Vince and his wife had started a small management company and, seeing Bon down on his luck, brought him in to help around the office. The jobs were small, but they helped Bon stay afloat. Then, one day, Vince got a phone call. George Young was looking for a new lead singer for his. In early 1975, AC/DC's second album, TNT, pushed their success even further, climbing to number 2 on the charts. Tracks like It's a Long Way to the Top and Jailbreak quickly turned into anthems. Around that time, their manager took a major step by sending demo tapes and photos to contacts in London. Phil Carson, an executive at Atlantic Records, listened and was impressed, so much so that he offered them a global record deal. That moment changed everything for the band. By 1976, ACDC was touring across Europe, serving as the opening act for some of the world's biggest rock bands, Black Sabbath, Kiss, Aerosmith, and The Who. Their international release of High Voltage sold over 3 million copies, launching them far beyond Australia and placing them firmly in the global music spotlight. Then came 1979, when the band decided to take their biggest gamble yet. Atlantic Records was demanding a hit, so AC/DC brought in renowned producer Robert John Mutt Lange. This marked the first time the band worked without George Young, the older brother of Malcolm and Angus. Over just 3 weeks, they recorded Highway to Hell in London. When it dropped in July, the album was an instant success. It became their first US release to sell over 1 million copies and climbed to number 17 on the Billboard charts. In time, Highway to Hell would sell over 8 million copies, securing its place as one of the greatest rock albums ever made. For Bon Scott, it was his proudest achievement, but tragically, also his last. He had finally arrived. His distinct voice was everywhere, his name was known, and AC/DC was soaring. In his final weeks, Bon's life was a whirlwind of music, partying, and unpredictability. The Highway to Hell tour had just ended on January 27, 1980, in Southampton. Shortly afterward, he appeared on Top of the Pops and began working on early material that would later become Back in Black. During this period, Bon was frequently out on the town in London. One of his favorite hangouts was the Music Machine Club in Camden, where he was often seen drinking heavily and mingling with a diverse crowd of friends, musicians, and drug users. On the night of February 18, Bon returned to the Music Machine and drank with friends, including musician Alistair Kinnear, who had known connections to heroin. According to Kinnear's later account, Bon became too intoxicated to function. Around midnight, Kinnear put him in the passenger seat of his small Renault 5. When he couldn't wake him, he contacted Bon's ex-girlfriend, Silver Smith. Fink pointed out that Bon was surrounded by known users that night, including Kinnear and Pete Way from the band UFO. Witnesses said Bon looked lethargic and had pinpoint pupils, classic signs of heroin use. Geordie Bon really liked him. He even told his friends that Johnson reminded him of Little Richard and truly understood what rock and roll was all about. It almost felt like Bon had unknowingly chosen his own successor. Just 2 months after Bon's passing, AC/DC brought Brian Johnson into the band. They didn't waste any time. In April 1980, they flew to the Bahamas to begin working on a new album with producer Robert John Mutt Lange. Johnson later admitted that he was nervous and had no idea how massive this would become. He simply gave it everything he had. On July 25, 1980, they released Back in Black. It wasn't just a return, it was a worldwide phenomenon. The album cover was all black, a tribute to Bon, but the music inside was loud, bold, and full of energy. Fans across the globe instantly connected with it. The album soared to number 1 in the UK and reached number 4 in the US. Its popularity was so intense that it pushed ACDC's earlier albums back onto the charts, something that hadn't been seen since the Beatles. Over time, Back in Black became a giant. In the US alone, it went 27 times multi-platinum, making it the third highest-selling album in American history, trailing only behind Michael Jackson's Thriller and the Eagles' Greatest Hits. Globally, the album sold an estimated 50 million copies, making it the second best-selling album of all time after Thriller. Interestingly, it never reached number 1 in the US, but it remained in the top 10 for more than 5 months. Some fans even believe that Bon had a hand in writing the lyrics, especially for songs like You Shook Me All Night Long, though that's never been confirmed. While Bon Scott didn't live to witness the success, he was far from forgotten. In 2003, Bon was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside ACDC. His nephews were there to accept the honor on his behalf. The following year, Classic Rock magazine named him the greatest frontman of all time, placing him above even Freddie Mercury and Robert Plant. In 2006, Hit Parader ranked him among the top 5 heavy metal vocalists of all time. Bon's legacy lived on through his music. Highway to Hell, a song he co-wrote, was included in Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. The album it appeared on also made the magazine's top albums list. His memory extended far beyond the English-speaking world. A French band wrote a tribute, as did a German hard rock group and even a Romanian band. His loss was felt everywhere. In 2012, Back in Black was added to the Grammy Hall of Fame. It was another way to honor Bon's legacy through the very music that helped define him, and that the band created in his memory.